Chris, here we talk about when, as an India and US IT staffing, we depended on US market. So current situation, and primarily as a current situation in US. So what do you think the impact it is going to have with offshore recruiting that is based out of India, the companies as well as the recruiters' future, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few levers here, right? There's the political levers and there's the economic levers. So the economic levers are essentially, I mean, like I said, right now in the US, unemployment is the lowest it's been in 100 years. So if and when companies can hire talent here, they will. As we know, the world is flat, globalization, right? You can hire people in Ireland, India, Russia, wherever, right? Japan. So I do believe there's still a market for that relationship to exist. But again, I go back to the political stance. I mean, currently the current political situation in the US is more, you have a president who is looking to bring more jobs into the US as opposed to China or other countries. You know, and this isn't in the US, you know, we have Republicans and Democrats and all that. So we can talk about the political impacts all day, but right now there's a focus on bringing jobs to the US and not necessarily outsourcing the jobs, but that's more keyed in on manufacturing than it is like business and professional sector. So again, even Medicus, we started to explore offshore relationships for sourcing, you know, previously, like, you know, I had done this at Randstad previously. So there is a value to that relationship and there are efficiencies to be gained by working with offshore partners. You just have to know what that niche business is that or what are you trying to solve for, right? In the US, I know for us, we were trying to solve for the cost of labor was going up significantly. We could get just as skilled or better skilled labor offshore at a lower cost. That made total sense. So as long as the labor is as good or better, and there's a cost benefit of that relationship, I could see that continue.
So here, are you saying those companies who are being associated with a bigger clients, which is like the client which has a flow, those clients will sustain, and with the implementation partners, the integration teams, or maybe the tier ones, who depends on the mid layer, that kind of companies may go away. That is what happened in 2007-9 period. Those companies which are mushroomed during that time, they just vanished. So do you think that kind of situation may occur now?
Yeah, I mean, again, because of the economic conditions, that could happen. But I think what's happening now, Suman, in the US specifically, is that we've been a very heavy full-time employee-centric society. We have about 13% of our employees are temporary in the US, 87% are full-time. The trend is that over the next 5 to 10 years, we see that number going as high as 30%. So we see the temporary workforce increasing here. We see the freelance contracting workforce increasing, and, you know, companies using, you know, flexible labor in a more advanced way. So I think there's an upside to people in the US, but I also think there's an upside to offshore firms that have flexible labor relationships, right? Because again, I think in the US, because of COVID, because of people working remotely, I think the comfort level, we're being forced to increase our comfort level with remote work. So, you know, for you know, the generational differences, you have to keep in mind, I'm now 49 years old. I'm in Generation X, if you will, if you look at the generational gaps. The baby boomers here are retiring. The baby boomers are very traditional, right? They grew up with parents. I mean, this is in the US again. They grew up with their father went to work and their mother stayed home, right? I mean, this is 50 years ago.
Yes.
So I come from a world where everybody works, right? My wife works, I work, you know, I do duties at the household. My wife does, I wash laundry, I watch the kids, you know. So as the world evolves, we all get more comfortable with new things. So people like me in Generation X are very comfortable with technology. We're very comfortable with remote workforce. So as boomers retire, you're going to see more millennials, Gen Y, Gen X leading the workforce. And we're all a lot more comfortable with this. So again, that's where I see that those relationships expanding.
That's a pretty good explanation. Yes. And here, do you believe the generation that is coming now, those kids born in 90s, will they be fine to work in 9 to 6 jobs, or they would love more work in 5 to 6 hours or from home with more flexibility and recognition, Chris?
Yeah, it seems that that generation appreciates flexibility more than they appreciate some other benefits that maybe I appreciated. They actually they don't seem to need stability. They believe, again, with the freelance workforce, that the temporary workforce increasing, they get a job anywhere. Now, again, COVID's changed that a little bit. But if you look at that generation previous to COVID, their view of the world is, I want to work for a company that's flexible. I want to work for a company that gives back and has a greater purpose than just, revenue and gross profit margin. And again, so companies, we're building programs around that. Like Medicus has a flexible work program. We have a remote work program. So, that trend was continuing. With COVID, because more people are home, people will work from home. But I'm curious, for me now, my kids that were working, I have a 20 and 18-year-old, they were working. Well, they lost their job because of COVID. So maybe stability becomes important to them again when they see a global pandemic event like COVID happen, to be determined. But the younger people almost always want and value flexibility more than stability, or even sometimes a greater income.
Absolutely. Yes. And the companies needs to accept this reality, and they need to understand that this is what the change could be, and they should allow people, they should trust people more than having them and they're just micromanaging.
Suman, I agree. I said to CEOs before, I've done some executive coaching, and I said, do you think people wake up to fail? Like, do you think your people wake up and say, I'm going to do a bad job today? Nobody wakes up to fail. People want to do a good job. 99% of people work hard. They do the right thing. They want to work hard. So you have to get that 5% of people that don't do that out of your company. And the other 95% you have to trust, right? They wake up, they want to do a good job. So you have to build the right structure, the right technology platform, the right culture to incent them and inspire them to do good work, because people want to do a good job when they wake up every day.
Absolutely. Yes. And here is an interesting question for you, Chris. You have been associated with recruiting since more than 2 decades, and you have worked with Indian staff offshore recruiting team more than a decade or so. So what do you suggest? What would be your advice for the offshore recruiting teams who does hands-on, for recruiters, the leaders, and the managers who operate from India in staffing companies?
Again, I think that level of trust and relationship is key. For me personally, you have to feel like the team in India is truly an extension of whatever team you have in the country you reside. I do believe that in-person meetings once a year at least helps build trust, helps build relationship, helps build a greater understanding of what the goals are. And you have to have 100% trust that your colleague that's halfway around the world is working just as hard as you are, has the same goals that you have, the same objectives, and are doing the work for the most part the same way. And it just feels like an extension of the team. Like at no point in my team in India did I ever feel like we were misaligned. Did I ever feel like that team wasn't working as hard as we were? Honestly, I felt like that team was working harder than my team in the US. So, you want to have that level of trust and relationship that the leadership team in India is aligned with the leadership team in the country in which the business is residing, right? So when that exists, that's where the magic happens. If you don't have that level of trust and relationship, it can be a scary place for both parties, right? So, as a leader that, has built teams in India and other countries, Kuala Lumpur, Poland, that was always my focus of, I want this person to feel like they're part of my team. They're on my team. There's nothing different except we're 5,000 miles apart. There should be no other difference. Obviously, having the right technology in place, you need that as well, right? Your recruiting team needs to have access to your database, just like your team in the US. They need to have the same phone system, just like the US. So it just has to be the same company. There shouldn't be any differences, because there really are no differences. It's just you're in a different country, in a different part of the world, but you're doing the same work, and so you have to treat it the same.
Absolutely. Yes. And here going let's more on ground level discussion, Chris, and you have been seeing people, recruiters, and you are walking to desks as well, right? While they're working, correct, Chris? When recruiters are working, you go to the desk and you check how things are, or you just walk on the floor as well?
Yeah. I mean, look I think the phrase is called a Gemba walk. I don't know where the word Gemba came from, but yeah, a Gemba walk manager is you just walk on the floor. Like I have no purpose other than to just check in with people and see how they're doing. And when you check in with people on the floor, if they're in the database, you're like, hey, show me how you search for a candidate, or hey, show me how this works. And you get a feel for, are they using the systems right? But you're actually getting a feel for, are there inefficiencies in the system that you can help your recruiter become more efficient? You know, like as an example, in my company, when I started here, recruiters had to work out of 2 different databases because of technology challenges we had. Well, if I'm not doing a Gemba walk and I'm not on the floor and I don't see it, I can't fix it. So, you know, I come back to the IT team like, hey, why are my recruiters using 2 different databases? And they're like, well, you know, I'm like, okay, well, when can that change? Like they're doing the same work twice. So I don't want that to happen anymore. How do we change that? You know? So, yeah, that stuff's important. You know, the check-ins. And again, it just shows the people that you care and that you're involved. And you're not just sitting in your ivory tower all day in your office and, you know, you don't care about them. You know, if you go out on the floor and also, by the way, what I do, this is just something I do once a quarter, I have a challenge where I'll do a 2 or 4 hour call block on the floor against the whole team. And anybody who can beat me, I buy them a dinner. And if they lose, they buy me coffee for a week.
Wow.
And so I've yet to be beat. But what I do is I want to show them the pace in which they need to work, right? I'm trying to lead by example. And like, listen, I've done this job 25 years. So
yes.
if any new recruiter comes in and is like, oh, Chris is in his office, he doesn't know what we're doing. Once a quarter, I go on the floor, I get in the database, I make the phone calls, I recruit candidates, I sell to customers, and I've yet to have somebody beat me. So, you know, and it's fun, right? And it brings the buzz up. But the message I'm trying to send is, guys, I get your job. I can relate to what you're doing. I can do it. I have done it before. It's fun to do it, right? I think that sometimes people forget it's actually fun to do what we do. It's a good time, right? So you're talking to people all day. It's fun. So instead of staring at the phone like it's a monster, you're like, look, we're talking to people. Like, this is what we're doing. So if you don't like it, then it's not the right career for you. I mean, look, I've told people in staffing, Suman, you know this too. Once you do it for like a year, you either do it for the rest of your life or you just leave it. You either love it or you don't. And
yes,
if you love it, you do it forever. And if you don't love it, you'll find something else to do. And it doesn't make you a bad person, right? It just means it's not for you. So.
But staying here and just morning crying, things not work. You said absolutely. That time period, if you love it, either you'll stay for longer period of time or you are leaving. That's it. That's true.
It.
Very true, Chris.
That's it.
Yes. And here, we as a recruiter, there is a bad impression in the market, Chris. When we Google, there's like recruiters ghost, recruiters lie, recruiters like what they bluff. So I believe this should go away one or the other point of time. Because we work pretty hard. We try to connect good people with the client where they can solve bigger problems. So where do you think this notion came in that recruiters are like this? Where the badging thing came in, Chris? How do you think we can take this off?
Yeah, I think, my experience with bad recruiters is usually starts with number one, recruiters that are new and they just make mistakes. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to say, and they handle situations incorrectly. And that gives the industry a bad stigma. Like anything in the world, there's always 5% of people who just aren't good people, and they try to take advantage of situations. And so you might have a candidate who was in a situation like that where they felt like they were being taken advantage of. So what I say to every client, what I say to every candidate is that we are a for-profit business just like you are. And I'll make no mistake about it. We're trying to make a profit, but I'm going to be very clear. We're trying to make a fair profit. I'm not looking to try to take advantage of a candidate, take advantage of a client. I always say if a client and a candidate found out the pay and the bill rate, would they say, is that reasonable? Or would they say that's crazy, right? In staffing, in professional staffing, any margin between 25 and 35% is reasonable.
Yes.
If you're charging 80%, you got to ask yourself, are you taking advantage of a situation? Like, because what's going to happen is somebody's going to find out. And once they find out, it gives us all a bad name. So, win-win relationships are built on trust, transparency, honesty, people working in good faith. So yeah, you want to make a fair profit, but you don't want to be that recruiter that's taking advantage of a new candidate. Candidate just graduated from college and you pay them the lowest possible rate. It's like, they're going to leave, so it's never worth it. The thing is, like, taking advantage of one situation in the short term is never worth it in the long term. Never is. I always say, look, play the long game. Think about working with this person for 20 years and how would you treat that person, so.
And one more question is, since the situation changed, Chris, right? People work from home, there's a lot of pressure, and so many things are coming to the place. So do you think the way doctors, military persons, teachers, engineers, and architects, they have a certain period, they leave their job, they go get the training, and they come back. So do you think recruiters should go into that, the company should go into that mode? It's not that something you learned 10 years back and you do the same thing, but they should treat that, no, my team needs to be educated and trained and get ready every year, year on and year on. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, upgrading your skills. I mean, again, there's been books written about this, right? So again, I can use in the US. So 100 years ago, 8% of people in the US were farmers, okay? Right now it's 2%. So farming has changed, technology has changed, industries have changed, right? 100 years ago, cars were just being built. No such thing as a car, right? Well, now we have car manufacturing plants everywhere, and you have, line workers making cars. So the point is, like, the skills upgrade. Like, if you're not continuously evolving your skills, you will get left behind. So, to your point, yeah, continuing education is always a good idea. I mean, right now, there are people in the US that are saying, you know what, I can't find a job. I'm just going to go back and get my master's degree. I'm going to go back and learn a trade. I'm going to go learn how to be a mechanic. So, now is as good a time as any because margins are down, right? It's difficult. So if you have a job, work really hard to keep it. Because like I said, if you stick through it, you'll benefit from the uptick, right? I'll give you an example in the US, Suman. In February of this year, my division had a record month, best month we've ever had in the company's history. In March, COVID-19 happens. We had the worst month in company history, okay? We stick through it. Elective surgeries start to come back in the US. We went back and had the best month in company history in May, right? So if you quit in April,
wow,
you just missed May, right? So it's an interesting question, right? It depends on where you work. It depends on your situation. It depends on when you think the economy is going to turn back. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't answer that question for everybody. So your options are stick with your job you have and benefit from the uptick, or step back, learn a new trade, learn a new skill, continue your education, so it just depends on which way you want to go.
Absolutely. Yes, this answers my questions. And here there are a lot of things, like I believe you are associated with hands-on recruiting as well. As you said, you walk and you do recruiting by yourself to just boost the team up and to show that, see, if I can do that, everyone can do that. From that context, X-ray search, so many varieties of Boolean search, recruiting, LinkedIn recruiting, and so many things are coming on way. So I believe those are the sources of bringing the candidate to you. If you handle the candidates the way you have been handling in the past and you are getting a certain results, your results are not going to change if you learn more things, but you should understand how to handle people once you get it. What do you think, Chris? Isn't it correct?
100%. I mean, again, this is the people business. So
correct.
If you ever view a person as a commodity, it's not the right way to handle it. I would say that in my career in staffing, Suman, I mean, and I don't know, who may listen to this. You have two major sectors. You have general staffing, light industrial, and you have professional. On the professional side, it's very relationship driven. On the general side and the light industrial, it's very metrics driven. It's not good or bad, it's just different. So if you're the type of person that has, You want to have the same job every day. You want to have consistency. You want to have metrics, and you want to really control your results. General staffing, light industrial staffing is probably a better place for you. If you're into building relationships, long-term business, you're okay with a longer sales cycle. Professional staffing is a great place, right? Because if you play the long game, over time, if you're selling a service and you build trust, the candidate wants to work with you and nobody else. I mean, I'll tell you my approach, Suman, with salespeople and recruiters. I'll ask them in their first month of employment. I'll be like, what's your objective with this candidate? And they say, like, I want to submit them to a job. Like, okay, like that's not your objective. And then they'll say, well, I want to put them to work. Like, that's still not your objective. And they're like, well, Chris, what's the objective? I'm like, the objective is you're the only recruiter they work with. That's your objective, right? If you have a good candidate and you're the only recruiter they work with, that's gold, right? That's your income for the next 20 years.
Yes.
And if you can multiply that by 10, 20, 40, 50 candidates, that's how you build a career in staffing. So if you look at the person at the transactional level, you're making a mistake, right? You have to look at the person, you have to look at the candidate and the client as if I'm going to work with them for 20 years and I want to be the only person they work with. So once you shift your mindset to that, some people can do it, some people can't,
Yes.
Some people like the quick hits of the transactions and move to the next one. That's not professional staffing, That's light industrial staffing. That's okay. That's just not professional staffing.
So could you please elaborate more on industrial staffing and professional staffing to people to understand, Chris?
Yeah. So you think about like administrative, light industrial, construction. Those jobs are usually shorter term, less margin, more volume, right? Professional staffing is usually longer assignments, white collar workers, accounting, finance, engineering, healthcare, IT. And in those professional segments, those are very relationship based, very value based, and longer term to build, right? So if you start as a recruiter in IT or engineering, I always say, day one of your job, how many people are calling you, Suman the recruiter? I mean, nobody, because nobody knows you're here, right? So your objective is you're going to make these phone calls, but your objective is to get the people to call you back, and your objective is to have you be the only phone call. So in 3 months and 6 months and 9 months, that phone should start ringing more of people calling you, right? The objective is they call you when they're looking, they call you when they're hiring. So, it's just a longer term view of the business on the professional side, wherein light industrial, construction, secretarial, administrative, you can walk down the street, pick up a job order, make a placement that week. Just doesn't always happen that way on the professional side.
Absolutely. And here, so what is your thoughts on personal branding of recruiters, Chris? Do you think that is going to play a major role in coming days?
That's a really good question. I have found that the brand, and I would encourage people.
Chris, I lost you. Could you please come again?
That's okay. So yeah, I would encourage recruiters to have their own personal brand, because I feel like the best ones have one, whether it's, on their LinkedIn profile, in their email signature, and the way they speak to people. Like, I feel like some of the top have a very firm understanding of who they are and what their brand is. So, if you haven't gone through a brand exercise, I mean, people can just probably Google, how do I create my own personal brand, and find some really good ideas. But usually it starts with asking the people around you that you work with, give me 3 words that you would use to describe me and my brand. People are usually surprised, because what they think their brand is and what other people think their brand is 2 different things. So, you want to be genuine to your brand and how it comes off externally, not so much internally. Like, Suman, I've learned that, my personal brand is I'm extroverted, I'm outgoing, I'm very approachable, humble. That's my brand. I can't pretend like to be what I think a textbook CEO looks like. You know, the buttoned up CEO that's going to say the right thing and it's going to be super composed. It's not my brand. Doesn't make me a bad person. Doesn't mean I can't be a CEO. It's just not my brand. So you have to know who you are, but a lot of times you get who you are through feedback from your boss, from your peers, the people you work with, people that are closest to you. And I would just, it starts as simple as write down 3 words to describe my brand, what you think it is. And people would be surprised to find that what other people think is a lot of times different what they think of themselves.
Yes, and that is where the values gets associated with it, isn't it, Chris? The personal values, right?
Yep, for sure.
Yes, very good. So here we heard a lot of things from you about industry. So now as a successful person, just wanted to understand, what is your daily routines and what makes you to wake up every day and go with the same zeal every day to work, Chris?
So a couple things. I know for me personally, physical fitness and my health is important to me. So I wake up every day and I either do yoga, I stretch, I ride the bike, I work out. I like to get my energy up in the morning, take a shower, head to work. I'm usually at work by 7:30 or 8 o'clock every day. My energy's already up. I know personally for me, my energy is up from 8 o'clock till about 2 o'clock. So what I do is I move some tasks that might be easier or more menial to the afternoon. And I tackle my bigger projects in the morning because that's when I have my energy. I also know that I want to start my team's energy up in the morning. So I think it's good that I come in with energy because it is true that, your people will emulate the leader, right? So if the leader has high energy, usually the energy goes up.
True.
If the leader has low energy, the energy goes down. So I know what my personal schedule is. Now you may be surprised to hear this. I'm a very hard worker. At 5 o'clock every day, unless I have a scheduled meeting, I push away from my desk and I go home. I have 3 kids. I have a wife. I'm at home for dinner at 5:30, and I have dinner with my family. Now at 7 o'clock, I log back in like a lot of people do, and I might attend to emails, make a couple calls, but like from 7:30 or 8 till 5, I am focused on my work. And at 5 o'clock, I try to be focused on my family. So, I think, having my own time in the morning to work out, working hard, getting home for my family, I think people need to have balance. Again, what I did, Suman, years ago, and I'd recommend this to everybody.
Please.
If you look at how many hours there are in a month, right? If there's 30 days in a month and there's 24 hours in a day, there's 720 hours in a month. I want people to write down how they use their hours, right? So as an example, if I work 9 hours a day, 5 days a week for 4 weeks, that's 180 hours. Okay, so I take that out of my number, right? Then I work out 1 hour a day, 3 days a week. That comes out of my hours, right? I want to be a father. That comes out of my hours. I want to be a friend. That comes out of my hours, right? And once you start to do that exercise, you actually find there's plenty of time to do all the things you want to do. There's plenty of time for recreation. There's plenty of time for fun. There's plenty of time for work. And I think people finding a balance is critical to long-term sustainability in recruiting, because recruiting's hard. I've been in this 25 years. Hasn't gotten any easier. It's still hard, but you have to have the right mindset and the right balance. And if you don't take care of yourself, like I've always said to my wife, you can't take care of other people if you don't take care of yourself. So,
Absolutely.
I start with taking care of myself. And if I take care of myself, I feel like I can take care of other people.
You said it truly. What I would say, if I control myself, how could I control other people? So I need to control myself first.
Correct.
And
Correct.
here we work in the...
So yeah.
Yes, please.
No, I was going to say, Suman, and what happens is sometimes burnout. People work too hard. So they do 11-hour days at work, 12-hour days at work. And you can do that for a while, but you're going to burn out. You can't do it long term. You got to take a break. You got to take a vacation. You got to, you got to think about your own personal well-being in order to be great at your job.
Absolutely. And here I would like to add a little bit to what you said. Working out for 12, 15 hours, Chris, if there's a purpose behind it, right? So it's a great fun too. We do not feel like we're exhausted. It's like we are working for a cause. But there should be a break for that. There should be a break for that. That's pretty rightly you said. And we work in the night shift here, Chris, you understand, and we work against the nature. So here, Indian traffic is totally different than how it is in US, because we have the geography and the population, right? And so what would you suggest to the people, to the recruiters in India, understanding this kind of geography, the timing, and working with the people in different geography? So what would you suggest or any advice as a leader?
Again, based on your work schedule and what's expected from you in the workplace, I think once you understand that, you have to work backwards into your schedule, right? Like what are the best times to sleep? When are the best times to rest? When's the best time? Don't be afraid to take a break during the day. Like, do you have the level of relationship with your manager and your team that you understand that I can't make phone calls for 9 straight hours? I think call blocking is a critical aspect of recruiting and being really good. And what I mean by that is it's proven from adult learning and education that adults can't do a task well for longer than 2 hours at a time, because your brain just can't focus that long. So what I tell my recruiters to do is I want you to build 90-minute or 2-hour call blocks into your day. And I want to see 2 or 3 call blocks throughout the day. So if you're on the phone for 6 hours out of 9, that's great. The other 3 hours might be a meeting with your manager, a break, lunch, a workout in the middle of the day. I don't know what you're going to do, right? But
right.
you have to break up your day. You cannot make phone calls for 9 straight hours. It can't happen. It's impossible. Now, maybe you can do it, but what's going to happen is you're not going to do it well, right?
True.
So I think that's the key to it. And then, yeah, outside of the workplace, I mean, I never had the chance to get to see the team. We had other people come over to India, and we had some people from India come visit us. But to your point, like, I think if you understand the culture there, it's like, just know what's expected of me here so that I can spend my time how I want to spend my time.
Yes, very true. And you have simplified things in a matter of how someone should manage times in daily basis. And you have explained very well about your personal stuff as well. And yes, so I forgot. There was a pretty good question I was thinking, Chris. Okay. All right. Yes. So Chris, you have traveled, you have walked your top level from being the bottom level. So the people who are joining newly to this industry, so could you please suggest if they have a dream to get to the next level or to be a successful in this industry, what should be your suggestion? If I'm a recruiter, I want to be a lead, manager, director, so on and on. So what would be your suggestion, please?
Excellent question. So the first answer to that is master the job you're in. So if you're a recruiter, the first question you have to ask yourself is, are you one of the top 1/3 recruiters in the office you work in or the division you work in? If you look around and there's 10 recruiters and you're not in the top 3, don't even think about the next job.
Wow.
Right? So you don't have to be number 1, but you got to be in the top 3 or 4 out of 10, right? If you want to advance to the next role, because competency is the number 1 skill you have to have. You can't be a great recruiting leader if you never recruited. You can't be a great sales leader if you never sold. So even though you might have intrinsic leadership qualities and you may have been a sports captain on a team or a leader in your previous job, you have to be good at recruiting. You have to be good at sales. So until you arrive in the top 1/3 of your peer group, I wouldn't even think about the next job. And there's a book. Oh God, who wrote it? It was about the 10,000 hours to mastery. It's called The Outliers. It's a book called The Outliers. The author talks about it takes 10,000 hours to master something. That's roughly 4 or 5 years. Now, I would tell recruiters, you can get promoted in a year, 2 years, 3 years. You can get promoted in a couple of years, but if you gotta master it, it takes 3 or 4 years. So I just say, don't worry about the next job until you master the job you have. And if you're really good at it, you don't have to tell anybody else. They'll tell you,
Yes. Like first you become the person and the position will attract you. Isn't it the way you explained it, Chris? It's not you go to the position, but become that person and you attract the position to you.
Yes.